In 1982, Rupert Griggs, the son of British film legend Oliver Griggs, vanished into the dense jungles of northern Laos, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and sorrow for those who loved him. This story is not just another sensational tale you might find on tabloids, but a meticulously researched account that his family and the world deserve. What truly happened on Rupert's last assignment? Why did it take nearly 4 decades to uncover his lost satchel of photographs? And what chilling, forgotten images still lurked within? There was one discovery, however, that rewrote everything the world thought it knew about Rupert's mysterious fate. Before we unravel Rupert's story, let's agree on one thing. You're here for the real story, not wild speculation. Drop a comment and share where you're listening from. The fact that we're piecing together this mystery together with the respect it deserves matters deeply. Rupert Griggs was not just any conflict photographer. He was cinematic royalty, son of the legendary swashbuckling actor Oliver Griggs. But Rupert chose a camera over a stage sword. He wasn't chasing Hollywood accolades. He was chasing the unvarnished truth. In the late 1970s and early 80s, while Europe obsessed over headlines about the Asian conflicts, Rupert was in the thick of it, documenting reality. Working for the revered Global Observer magazine, he brought home powerful images that captured not only the brutality, but also the dignity and resilience within war. He had his father's adventurous spirit, but he turned it toward a different heroic path. On August 18, 1982, Rupert's hunt for truth led him into the heart of northern Laos, a place boiling over with secrets and civil strife. What he unearthed would haunt his family and alter the world's understanding of his disappearance. To understand Rupert's end, you need to know who he was. Born in 1950, Griggs cast a long, complicated shadow. His father, Oliver, was adored worldwide for his dashing roles. But Rupert's childhood was marked more by lonely hotel rooms than by premieres. His mother, French actress Simone Morel, raised him in Paris, instilling in him a love for art, but also a quiet, thoughtful reserve, unlike his father's flamboyance. As a young man, he dabbled in acting one minor film, swiftly forgotten. But reality always called louder. In his early 20s, Rupert discovered photojournalism. War zones became his stage, his camera the script. He saw himself not as a hero, but as a witness. His mission, to show the world real stories, not fiction. By the early 1980s, Rupert was already a decorated conflict photographer. He had covered revolutions across Central America and Southeast Asia, always drawn to places where the truth was in danger of being silenced. Editors respected him. Fellow journalists admired his steel nerves, but sometimes feared for his life. Rupert always believed, to show the real story, you had to risk everything. In late summer 1982, the Global Observer needed someone to document the silent, brutal war raging in the hills and valleys of northern Laos, a war the rest of the world preferred to forget. Rupert accepted immediately, knowing the risks. Civil war, covert operations, shifting alliances. Laos was a powder keg. He packed his battered cameras and took a flight to the Laotian capital, Vientiane. He would never return. Arriving in Vientiane, Rupert quickly connected with a tight-knit community of foreign correspondents and aid workers who operated amid the uncertainty and suspicion shadowing Laos. These seasoned professionals understood the cost of digging too deep. Several had already vanished or been detained in the last 2 years. The city may have appeared calm, its markets bustling and riverfront lively, but rumors whispered of secret military operations in the north, of strange convoys moving at night, and of villages wiped off the map without explanation. Rupert wasted no time. Within a week, he was on the road north with fellow journalist Ingrid Lund, a Norwegian reporter whose courage was matched only by her intuition. The two had collaborated in El Salvador and recognized in each other a rare blend of recklessness and professionalism. Their destination was the remote border town of Muang Sai, a place even government officials visited reluctantly. They traveled light cameras, notebooks, a map inherited from a very nervous UN official, and just enough Laosian currency to bribe their way through a few likely checkpoints. The journey was dangerous. The single-lane road snaked through dense jungle and steep hills, patrolled at random by armed militias with shifting allegiances. At each checkpoint, the scrutiny grew more intense. One night, shortly after dusk, they were forced to abandon their jeep and travel by foot after hearing the distant, unmistakable rattle of automatic gunfire. A sound, Ingrid muttered, you never really get used to. By late August, they reached Muang Sai, a town buzzing with whispered tension. Foreigners were rare, and the local innkeeper eyed them with suspicion. Over weak tea in a dimly lit room, they gathered stories of a crashed Soviet helicopter to the north, of entire villages relocated overnight by unknown soldiers, of a mysterious highland encampment always avoided by locals. But underneath the fear, villagers mentioned seeing the ghost photographer, a foreigner with bushy brown hair, always with a camera around his neck, seen in the company of strange armed men some weeks earlier. Ingrid and Rupert traded loaded glances. They decided to investigate the encampment at dawn. At first light, with mist lacing the treetops, they set off for the highlands. Their guide-a-boy, no older than 16, called Kep, led them along hidden paths away from the roads. The jungle was alive with movement and noise, insects, the calls of unseen birds, the clang of distant metal. Kep moved quickly, barely glancing back at his charges, always tense, always listening. Midway through the climb, the group stumbled upon abandoned military gear, rusted helmets, a tangle of radio wire, spent metal casings. The silence pressed in as they realized this was no mere ghost story. The area had been a battlefield. Kip signaled urgently for them to keep moving. At noon, just as the heat became suffocating, they reached the edge of a small plateau overlooking a collection of camouflaged tents and makeshift watchtowers. Through telescopic lenses, they spotted men in mismatched uniforms, with insignia they didn't recognize, moving crates under tarps and loading vehicles painted with no national markings. Rupert's instinct as a reporter told him this was bigger than any local skirmish. He and Ingrid snapped dozens of covert photos, their hands trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of the story. Suddenly, from the shadows, a group of armed men appeared on the ridge behind them, raised voices. Orders in a language neither recognized. Rifles pressed to backs. Their cameras and notebooks were confiscated. It was the last anyone in the press community would see or hear of Rupert Griggs and Ingrid Lund for almost 40 years. The disappearance of Rupert Griggs and Ingrid Lund set off a quiet storm across the international press. Editors at the Global Observer and beyond pressured diplomatic channels for answers, but the Laotian authorities insisted the pair never crossed into restricted territory, and their government-issued press credentials disappeared into a bureaucratic void. Grieving families received little more than vague reassurances. Search operations were too risky or inconclusive. Still, whispers and rumors trickled back to Vientiane. Some said the journalists had been seen alive, moved north under heavy guard. Others claimed they had perished in an ambush. The months turned into years. The relationship between Laos and the rest of the world fractured, especially following an intensification of covert operations in the region. For Rupert's mother, Simone, life became an endless cycle of hope and heartbreak. She traveled from Paris to Thailand, then as close to the Laotian border as authorities would permit, meeting ex-prisoners, interviewing refugees, and slipping bribes to anyone who claimed to have news. Despite the passage of time, scattered clues continued to surface. In 1987, a Laotian defector mentioned seeing 2 European captives in a jungle camp deep beyond the Namu River. Another refugee described a hidden stockade surrounded by mines where foreign voices occasionally echoed in the night. Though the details conflicted, one point became clear. The captive's fate was bound up in something far darker than anyone dared believe. Meanwhile, the world moved on. Global headlines shifted to famines, falling regimes, the rise of new wars. Rupert's name faded from memory for all but a few stubborn friends and his devastated family. Yet every few years, a new rumor or supposed sighting would revive the mystery for a brief moment, always ending in disappointment and deeper questions. Then, in the late 2000s, as the region stabilized and travel restrictions eased, new hope flickered. Historians, journalists, and documentary filmmakers descended on Laos, driven by curiosity and the enduring legend of the ghost photographer. In 2012, Norwegian filmmaker Liv Bergström was gathering oral histories in rural Muang Chai when an elderly villager handed her something wrapped in oilcloth. Inside was a battered, water-stained satchel stamped with faded letters. R. Griggs. It contained ruined rolls of film, fragments of notebooks, and 2 corroded press badges, one for Rupert, one for Ingrid. The shock was immediate. The satchel was authenticated by multiple experts, and its autographs matched records from the Global Observer and the Norwegian Press Guild. Where had it come from? The villager explained he'd found it half buried at the edge of a forgotten encampment, exposed by a monsoon-swollen creek just weeks earlier. But the greatest revelation came when one of the film rolls, after painstaking restoration, yielded a handful of ghostly images. Dense jungle, tense men in mismatched uniforms, crates stamped only with coded markings, and most chillingly, blurry shots of Rupert and Ingrid, hands bound, flanked by stern-faced guards. The world's interest reignited. The mystery of what happened to Rupert Griggs and Ingrid Lund was far from over. And now there was tangible evidence hinting that, even in captivity, they fought to bear witness and leave a record of the truth. The story of Rupert Griggs and Ingrid Lund, dormant for decades, exploded back into the world's imagination after the discovery of their satchel. Media outlets across continents competed for every new scrap of evidence uncovered in the Laotian jungle. Governments scrambled for plausible deniability, while conspiracy theorists and war historians dug eagerly into what had become one of the last great Cold War mysteries. Liv Bergström and her team, funded by donations from press freedom foundations and Rupert's surviving family, pressed their search beyond where any official investigator would go. Local villagers, at first fearful, gradually began to offer stories in exchange for the hope, or simple relief, that the ghosts of the past might finally be put to rest. They trekked through remote valleys, where no map was reliable, and no one trusted strangers, following whispered routes to overgrown, abandoned clearings. In late October, with monsoon rains rising and nights noisy with insects and worry, their guides led them to a place locals called the Silent Ground, a shadowy plateau where people said the jungle never quite recovered. There, the searchers found signs that time and the forest had almost managed to erase: half-buried planks, melted glass, the clasp of a camera bag. Beneath the roots of a giant fig tree, they uncovered a metal ammunition box wrapped in remnants of damp, rotting tarp. Inside, an old camera, its lens clouded, its body pitted but intact. In a side pouch, stained by time and water, rested brittle pages of a diary and a bundle of exposed film, each frame a secret in limbo. The camera and documents were flown to European labs accustomed to restoring Cold War artifacts. As each artifact was coaxed back to fragile life, a new chapter of the story appeared. Rupert's diary, spattered with mud and rain, revealed not just dates, but names and sketches. Fellow prisoners, local informers, a British contractor who tried to bribe the captors, even a coded map showing escape routes through the valley. His words spoke of hope, but also of the slow, devastating realization that he and Ingrid were not ransom pawns, but witnesses to something profoundly dangerous. The diary and film told a chilling but inspiring story. The recovered negatives, carefully developed by forensic specialists, revealed the truth the captors had hoped to bury forever. Blurred shots captured men in foreign uniforms, negotiating over crates by moonlight. Prisoners forced to dig trenches along jungle paths, and poignantly, images of Rupert and Ingrid, a final defiance in their tired faces as they secretly photographed their captors. The final, shattering image was of a notebook page. If our story survives, let it reveal not only cruelty, but also the stubborn, bright flame of resistance. Publication of these materials triggered an international outcry. Human rights organizations called for new tribunals. Families who had given up hope learned their loved ones' fates, bringing both sorrow and breathless relief. And historians, now in possession of Rupert and Ingrid's last testimonies, redrew the history of covert foreign operations in Southeast Asia, forcing governments to acknowledge truths they had denied for generations. Rupert's and Ingrid's legacy didn't end with recovered film or rotting diary pages. Press organizations established the Griggs Lund Award for Courage, vowing that no truth-teller would ever again vanish without a trace. The jungles that once swallowed these two journalists had at last given up the secrets they risked everything to reveal. The revelation of Rupert Griggs and Ingrid Lund's fate sent ripples far beyond the circle of journalists and historians. It became a symbol for all those who risk everything for the truth. For weeks, headlines circled the globe, from BBC broadcasts to late-night American talk shows. The recovered photographs and diary entries were published, their haunted images and heartfelt words shaking audiences and dignitaries alike. But the truest impact lay in the human stories that surfaced at last. Families of the missing, who for decades lived with wounded hope, could finally mourn and remember with certainty. Letters, scraps of journals, and photographs found near Rupert's camera told not only his story, but also those of other lost witnesses, their triumphs, fears, love, and unbreakable resolve to see the world as it really was. Rupert's mother, Simone, became an international figure no longer just a grieving parent, but an advocate. With support from journalists' organizations and human rights groups, she founded the Griggs Foundation. Its mission: help and protect reporters in conflict zones, ensuring the world never again loses voices to silence and shadows. A year after the Satchel's recovery, the Griggs Lund Award was established. It honored not only Rupert and Ingrid, but all who risked and continue to risk everything in pursuit of fact over fiction. Its inaugural ceremony featured Laotian reporters who helped uncover the fate of their missing colleagues, turning loss into an alliance of hope and memory. The area once infamous for disappearance was transformed. The hills outside Muangshai, once littered with mines and secrets, were cleared and made safe. A memorial garden planted where Rupert's satchel was found. Each tree was named for a missing journalist or villager, their stories now part of a growing forest of remembrance. Rupert's and Ingrid's final images, the grainy, determined portraits, the defiant message photographed from a notebook, became icons in newsrooms and lecture halls worldwide. Students and reporters drew inspiration, learning how true courage is forged not in reckless risk, but in the refusal to look away, even when it costs everything. And the last image, the one found in the surviving camera, ended up in galleries from London to Sydney. Rupert and Ingrid, side by side, battered and unbowed, the camera at their feet, a silent promise that truth, once buried, will rise. Where a story once vanished into the jungle, a new legacy was born, a beacon for all who walk into darkness, armed only with a pen, a camera, and a sense of justice. Sometimes the deepest mysteries are solved not by heroes, but by ordinary people refusing to forget. And through their persistence, Rupert's last wish was fulfilled. The world finally saw through his lens and his words, that even in the deepest night, the human spirit can shine through.